Hi again, everyone. So welcome today to the very first in our Teacher Tales Live webinar series. I appreciate it's such a busy time at the moment, so we're really grateful that you've chosen to be here today. And I know that you're going to find the stories from our guest speaker really useful and really inspiring for the rest of this term as well. So to introduce myself, my name's Edward. I look after some of our customer schools down here in the Southeast, and I'll be on hand to answer any questions that you might have about Iris Connect and how we can best utilize it in your school. But I'm thrilled to say that we're joined today by Chris Harrison, who's the assistant head at Grove Road Community Primary School in Harrogate. So he'll be talking today about strategies that he's put into place at his school so that they can continue with professional development throughout the pandemic. There will be an opportunity for you to ask any questions that you have for Chris about his plans and how they implemented various strategies at Grove Road. I'm not going to give anything away, and I will hand over to Chris shortly. But before I do, I think it would be great to hear from you about some of the CPD challenges that you've faced over the past year. So please could you write in the chat any CPD challenges that you've faced over the past year? You know, myself and my colleagues here at Iris Connect, we speak to so many teachers, senior leaders and head teachers, and so many people have said that unfortunately they've had to put professional development on hold over the last year, and that of course will bring challenges. So before we hand over to Chris, it would be great to hear from you some of the challenges that you've faced since the pandemic started. Who's going to be brave enough to be the first to volunteer? So Jenny Cryer has said, we've moved to totally virtual CPD and it's been on and off depending on the latest circumstances. So lots of reviewing and changing the schedule. Thanks very much for that, Jenny. I think so many teachers will resonate with that and recognise that it's had to be completely flexible, and so much of the professional development that's been planned has had to be changed at the last minute. So I'm sure Chris will be able to talk about their experiences with having to be quite light-footed. Claire has said, I'm new to the school and the role of Iris leader. Having not used Iris, it's been difficult to use as a development tool and I've not had a chance to implement it. Well, Chris today will be talking about implementing Iris Connect, so his stories I know will be really useful for you. But Claire, one thing that I'll be asking you and everyone on the call today to do later on is to get in touch with us so that your Iris Connect consultant can get in touch with you and make a plan on implementation. Charlotte said limitations on data collection. For example, learning walks, lesson drop-ins in order to inform follow-up on CPD. I mean, lesson walks, or learning walks, I should say, with bubbles, that's been a challenge for so many schools out there. Helen's saying a lot of teachers are not used to using technology so regularly, especially certain programs like Teams. So the focus has been on that in the past year rather than other CPD. I mean, so many schools, well, so many teachers, I should say, have had to get used to Teams and using video, not just for professional development, but for communication. So I really think there's been a learning curve for all of us there. I know that Chris and his colleagues have used Teams as well as, of course, Iris Connect. Joe's been saying CPD, so had to concentrate on IT for staff to learn about remote learning access. Again, all CPD has been virtual via Teams, thinking of staff well-being. CPD hasn't been a priority in terms of meeting aims in the school development plan. It's sad, but it's been really common over the last year that professional development in many schools hasn't been the #1 priority because, completely understandably, we've all been getting through the last year. Thank you so much, everyone, for contributing there. I really appreciate it. And I think it's really useful just to hear as a group the kind of challenges that everyone's been facing. Chris and his colleagues, they've been facing the same kind of challenges, and I don't want to steal Chris's thunder, but I know that he'll talk a little bit more about how they've been reacting to some of the same challenges that you've been facing as well. And I think it's just really worth mentioning again how difficult it has been over the last year for everyone. As I said, I speak to a huge amount of school leaders, and so many have understandably just not been able to prioritize professional development. There's been a focus on just getting through each day as it comes, and it's been really difficult to focus sometimes on the bigger picture. So as Chris does talk about Grove Road and how they've responded to the pandemic, I think it's important not to be too hard on yourself if you haven't been able to do as much as Chris and his team, but now is the time to refocus on giving your teachers the opportunity to re-engage with professional development, and most importantly as well, start collaborating with one another in a meaningful way. So I'm going to hand over to Chris now. Chris, over to you.
Okay, hi everybody. So just here's to put a face to a name. So I'm going to share my screen in just a moment, and I'll talk through the various things we'll be doing here at Grove Road. If you've got any questions, just feel free to fire away on the chat, and then we'll sort of tackle any questions at the end. So yeah, to kick off, as we said, I'm Chris Harrison. I'm assistant head teacher at Grove Road Community Primary School in Harrogate. My key focus areas: I teach year 6 full time, but I also lead on curriculum design, English, and sort of taking on the role of leading on staff development more recently. I appreciate that staff development just hasn't been a priority for so many of us over the last year or so, mainly because it's just juggling things and having the time to do it, and that getting to know these remote systems is enough of a learning curve as it already is. But now is a really good time for us to kind of put pedal to the metal and see where we can go. So just to give sort of an overview, we've based our online sort of strategies on the strategies that we already had in place. And these were based on Paul Garvey's talk for teaching. So we've got 2020's Film Club Learning Works. I'll talk through all of these sort of one at a time sequentially. I'll talk about what we already did and how we've tweaked them to suit a digital world. And the reason that we've started to do this remotely is we've seen the impact on staff development over this last year or so. We've not got that cross-pollination where you can pop into each other's classrooms and dip in and see good practice. And there's a wealth of things that you can get off social media. So Twitter has been brilliant for a lot of our staff, but we don't have that opportunity to go and see other schools and to go to brew-eds and to go to teach meets and the same kind of things that we've been able to do for so long. We've been so lucky to have. So I'll get straight into the strategies and how we've tailored them as we go along. And like I said, any questions, fire them in the chat and we'll unpick them afterwards. So our first one, 2020s, this is a strategy we've had in school for a number of years now. It involves pairing staff, any staff based in the classroom. They go and visit each other for 20 minutes. So pop into class, see 20 minutes of practice, and then they'll swap over and see the other member of staff. And that's followed by a 20-minute professional dialogue, which has key sort of focus questions to support with that conversation. And we plan it over a 2-year cycle in our academic calendar to have a different focus area each time for these 2020s. Now, the way we've changed these to meet our sort of digital needs are we share 20-minute iris clips with each other. And we discuss these virtually via iris rooms. And we've started using iris rooms over the last sort of 6 months or so. And it's basically the same as Teams, the same as Zoom like we're on now, but you can record it straight onto iris, and I'll explore that a little bit later. And we use key question sheets to support that professional dialogue. And you can leave comments on each other's videos, which has been really, really useful. So you can give each other feedback and ask questions on the comment tab and videos. There's been no changes to impact our workload with that because, you know, it's the same as popping into the class to see each other. It's slightly less pressure in terms of having another body in the room watching you teach, which can always be quite daunting. And in terms of workload, just the time it takes to log into the Iris Gear and get yourself recording. And then following that, the clips are then subsequently shared with SLT to make sure that they've got the overview of where we're at as a school, and to subject leaders, again, for that overview and quality assurance. And that has actually had a much better impact than just sharing the coaching notes with those members of staff, which we were before, because they can actually see the sessions themselves. I would say at this point that the culture of the school plays a really big role in this, in terms of the openness of sharing these clips. And there's been a lot of conversations, and we've grown this quite sensitively over time. We've not just put all these strategies straight in and thrown everyone in at the deep end. Our next strategy, more common, you'll get this in most schools with learning walks. We have 2 per half term, so every 3 weeks or so. Again, on that 2-year cycle with different focus each 3 weeks. We have reading, writing, maths and science yearly, and then every other topic area gets covered over the 2-year cycle. Before our learning walks, our subject leaders share something called a SERF, which is a self-evaluation reporting form. And that's based on our subject flowcharts. You can see our phonics flowchart on the screen at the moment. And they're just sort of a collection of about 8 or 10 questions that link directly to what we would want to have in a session at school. And that SERF, staff then send that back to the subject coordinator, and the learning walk is to quality assure that SERF. So it might literally take 2 or 3 minutes popping into a class. Does this classroom match what we're being told? You know, is this member of staff's reflection, is it kind of suiting where they're at? Are they picking out their strength and their next steps? Nowadays, what we're doing at the moment, because we can't pop into each other's classes because of bubbles, which seems to be a bit of a swear word nowadays, we can't pop into each other's classes, so we're conducting them through Iris Connect. And it's basically just a case of everybody records a clip and shares that with the subject lead, depending on what the focus on within the calendar is at the time. And then the subject lead can give comments, feedback on those Iris clips. So every member of staff gets 4 or 5 messages of feedback. And the good thing with that is whenever you put feedback to a video, it saves it with the timestamp on it, so you know exactly what timestamp that feedback relates to in the feedback given on your Iris clip. So that's been really, really helpful. And again, that hasn't built on the workload at all. It's actually made it easier for subject leads, because in terms of release time to come out of class, it was taking a full day to get around school, and you might, if you're doing a phonics learning walk, you might not be able to get into everyone's phonics session. So actually you've got them all banked together, and people can pick what they feel is their best to share with you. So the best thing about this is people are quality assuring themselves and saying, this is the best I've got to offer, this is where I feel I'm at, could you give me some feedback please? And then it means you're not walking in at any awkward times, because I don't know about you guys, but for me, every time I've ever been watched teaching, it always happens at tidy up time and it kills me. So it means that we can get really useful feedback that's relevant to taking our practice forward. Another one we run as a school, we run internal teach meets. Now we would love to be able to do teach meets and Iris on a larger scale, which is something we might be able to explore in future months. We do them internally, and every member of staff comes together and we share just a 2-minute snapshot of something that we found successful or something that we've really enjoyed doing. And again, that comes from our 2-year cycle, and we make sure that our 2020s, our teach meets, our learning walks, it's always a different focus for each one, so they're not overlapping. And that means that we're building up this bank of evidence over time. So we share that 2-minute snapshot, and at the moment we can do that just on Iris Connect rooms. So I would host an Iris Connect rooms. You can see the picture on the right hand side. We record the session just like we are now, and then save that onto our Iris session and share it with all the staff who were there and anyone who was away at the time. And it means that we've got this bank of really nice ideas that anyone can dip into over time. And we just use a single PowerPoint, screen share, and record the session from there. So that's been, again, no additional workload. It's been really easy to tweak and tailor into that. And then also we've got film clubs, which I know is a really quite a common one for Iris users. Ours is half-termly, and basically we just sit down in phases or teams, we crack out the popcorn and we share clips of each other and just have a bit of a chat about it. It's super informal, and we just watch a couple of clips that we've chosen to share with each other, again from that 2-year cycle. And all we're doing at the moment now, the clips are already recorded, so instead of sitting down with popcorn and having that time together, which is sad to not have that, we share all the clips with each other. And then we just meet on Iris Connect rooms and talk it through. And again, that's no additional workload. It's been a really easy process to switch it to being digital. In terms of more general CPD, we've taken a bit of inspiration from National College, who we've brought into as an online training provider. And I know most schools will have different online training providers that meet their needs. We've reflected on how we can kind of mirror that as a school model that's more bespoke to us. And we've started to construct our own CPD systems via Iris. So we deliver training sessions now via Iris Connect rooms, because we can't all get in the room together in the same way that we once did. And those sessions are recorded. So you can see on the right-hand side, we've got our curriculum of pride when we launched our new curriculum model, and we've got our reading spine CPD session. And on the reading spine CPD session, for example, the good thing is it's mirrored my PowerPoint and my mug, just like we've got now. So we can talk people through things quite nicely on there. And we record those sessions and we save them into the various different groups that we've got set on Iris. Now, just speaking about those groups, what we've done is we've used the groups tool on Iris, and we've set a whole curriculum model group. We've set a CPD group, and then we've set a separate group for each different subject area, where we can collate all of these Iris clips from the 2020s, the learning walks, the teach meets, all of these can get banked centrally into these places. And I'll talk about that in a bit more detail in a minute. But it's meant that it's really easy to have everything compartmentalized. So in terms of those Iris Connect groups, we use it to build our curriculum model now, and we're building it over a 2-year cycle, partly because our Ofsted window comes in about 18 months to 2 years, but mainly because we want to grow it gently. We don't want to force it. We want to grow it really carefully over time to make sure it's where we want it to be. So we use, this is our whole school curriculum model via Iris Connect groups. We've got 2020s, learning walks, film clubs, all of those feed into these continuously over the 2-year cycle, but only with staff permission. We don't share, say for example, if someone's got a fabulous science clip that we're desperate to share and the science lead says everyone needs to see this, we wouldn't share it if that person asked us not to, because we want to only share things that people are comfortable with sharing. It's created a really nice bank of evidence for support leaders, so for subject leaders. So for example, if Ofsted were to walk in tomorrow, I would just open my English group and I would talk through the reading and writing evidence that I've got there. And I would say, well, here's the training sessions we've delivered, here's the feedback on the learning walks in the 2020s, and here's all of this in one place that I can talk through really, really easily. Now, obviously, we don't do things for Ofsted. It's a pleasant, happy coincidence that it works really well for that. But for us, it's massive for new staff or new to phase staff. So, for example, if someone's new to Key Stage 1 and is really struggling with their delivery of mathematics, they might have come from Key Stage 2 and they might be struggling to know how to attack maths from a more foundational sort of aspect. You've got this bank of a minimum of a 2-year cycle's worth of videos and support advice and all these different ideas from 2020s and film clubs and teach meets and all of that stuff centralized. So it's just a case of going through and exploring it and having a really nice time as you do and seeing how that correlates to our subject flowcharts and our curriculum mapping. It's also been really interesting that we've started to share this more recently with our governing body, so they can have that that overview of our school development. Because mostly with governing bodies, they tend to go with what they're told rather than what they're seen. And we started to involve our governing body more with our learning walks and things, but obviously that's been kiboshed now. But we just have our governing body set up on IRIS, and they've gone through the IRIS training, and we're just gradually sharing these IRIS Connect groups, which are all quality assured. Staff have all said they're comfortable with it being shared, and then our governors can then have access and they can look at all of that. They can look at the feedback that's been given, they can look at the quality of the videos, and they can start to unpick that and explore that with the subject leaders and the senior leadership team. It's also meant that our training becomes more specific over time. So we've only started this within the last year, sort of 6 months to a year, but my reading training I delivered relatively recently, I don't need to re-deliver that training next year and every year subsequently after that. There's an expectation that staff will check into that video if they haven't already, particularly if they're new or new to phase. And then the next session I deliver on reading can be a step on from that, and we can look at that development over time. Because in my experience, we tend to have the same cycle of training coming in on a yearly basis in the schools I've worked in. You might have odds and ends that enrich things, but you tend to have this rolling model where you reuse the same training on a yearly basis to keep people up to date. But if that's all banked, then it's already there ready to roll, and you can look at the finesse and how you tweak things and take it forward. And like I said, it makes it more specific over time. Another thing that I've found more and more, so speaking as a parent, I've got a 20-month-old child at home who does not let me join in with much remote teaching and learning. It's been quite tricky. I've really enjoyed having the flexibility, being able to dip into these clips on and off. So I might save it for my PPA time, I might save it for a quiet evening if I want to, but I can chip into it. You know, I don't have to sit down and watch a whole half-hour session. I can just watch 5 minutes here and there, and I can dip back into it as and when I want to. So that flexibility has been really good for those with families or those with long commutes. So again, I've got between an hour and 2 hours commute home. Staying for a staff training session can be quite hard sometimes if it goes on till about 5 o'clock. Whereas if I can dip into that whenever I want and head home when I want to head home, my well-being's been protected there. So we're finding that flexibility for families and for people with longer commutes and people who just prefer to learn in broken down ways rather than sitting and watching a whole chunk, it's made it much more digestible, and it seems to be looking after people's well-being a little bit better. Like, people are enjoying that side of CPD a little bit more. In terms of where we're going with this now, we're growing this over a 2-year cycle. We started it a year ago. Obviously, it's taken a bit of a hit because we've not been able to do, say, the learning walks and pop into classes in the same way that we would do. And we've not been able to record those sessions in the same way that we would do, but we're really hitting the ground running now. And that 2-year cycle, we're feeling that would develop a really useful, well-rounded model that would support everybody, not just from a scrutiny point of view, but mostly from that staff development and that staff well-being point of view. And once, you know, we turn to normality, whatever that might look like, we're feeling that a lot of these strategies we'd really like to keep and maintain. So even when we're all learning back in person together, still filming that and still recording that session and uploading those to that to Iris groups would be really, really useful. And just to sort of finish off my last couple of bits, so I'm not waffling on too long, we're finding that the more we can streamline systems to have one system that does everything we need, the better, in our opinion. We don't want to have 50 different systems that do this, that, and the other because, well, firstly, I find myself scrolling through my phone with all these different logins saved. I'd rather have one centralized system that's really nice and easy to use. And that's what we're finding with Iris at the moment. And I sound a bit like I'm doing a sales pitch, but I promise I'm not. We're finding that because we've got the option of Iris rooms when we can do meetings like this, we've got Iris groups where we can share everything, have everything banked in one location, and we can have all of our Iris reflections and feedback. We're finding that model works really, really nicely and takes the pressure off staff having to get to know multiple systems. It's just getting to know different ways of using the same system, which is much easier to coach people through. So that's me pretty much done. I've gone as fast as I could. If anybody has any questions, please pop them into the comments and we'll plow through those. Or if you've got any suggestions or anything that you do differently, again, please share, because I'd love to see what you guys are doing differently and beg, steal and borrow your ideas. And then finally from me, obviously, I'm available on Twitter or via email, and I'm happy to share my details for those. And I'm happy to discuss anything school related, and particularly obviously anything I can support that's Iris related. I'm more than happy to do so. So thank you very much for that. I shall stop sharing my screen now.
Thanks very much, Chris. That was fantastic. And it's great to see such a wide range of uses for Iris Connect at Grove Roads, achieving so many different things. So for everyone watching, I'm sure you'll agree there's quite a lot to unpack there. So Chris has asked for your input, both in terms of questions and suggestions. Do feel free to type into the chat if anything comes to mind. But perhaps we could start where Chris started, really, looking at 2020s and Teach Meets and how they've used Iris Connect to overcome the challenges that were faced in hosting those. So has anyone got any questions related to the 2020s that Chris talked about and the online Teach Meets that he and his colleagues are now undertaking using Iris Connect?
Okay, that's a great question, Helen. So in terms of encouraging shy or less confident staff to get involved, what we found is it all rested on the feedback. So firstly, we started by, we grew it quite, it was quite isolated almost at first, just asking people to get used to recording. And then it became very much an approach where those of us in senior leadership who were kind of pushing the use of Iris, we made sure we were sharing clips of ourselves, because it's got to be a two-way thing. You know, if the deputy head teacher, assistant head teacher, and the subject leaders are sharing their clips, we felt that made a much more sort of mutually respectful model, rather than just asking people to share clips with us. And that's why I'm a big believer in having class-based senior leaders. I'm a really big believer in that. But also we found that because you can type feedback, and because we asked people if they would like to share their clips, and we're asking people because they're so good, that's played a big part in it as well. That's really boosted some people's confidence. And we've got some quite technophobic staff who really struggle with their confidence. They don't particularly like being observed. That's really helped, saying, you know, I really love this clip that you've done for your RE lesson. Please could I share it with the team? But there's no expectation that people do. We've also taken away all formal observations, unless somebody's requested one, if they need some help, but also if someone's an NQT or if someone's needing some additional support. We've taken away all of that formal observation. And when we were speaking to staff about bringing Iris in the first place, and we said that obviously taking away those formal observations takes a significant amount of pressure off, that balanced it quite nicely in that conversation, saying, you know, so if you'd like to share clips with us, you crop your clip and you share what you're happy sharing with. I'm not going to walk in when you're packing up for break time, or I'm not going to miss your learning objective delivery at the start of the session. I'm not going to miss all of that. You crop what you want to share and you share it with us. And that's been really good. And I'd also say the use of the film clubs has been really nice, because that's just in your face teams. So you're with a couple of mates that you teach with. And again, you don't have to share if you don't want to, but we found that nobody's shied away from it. And that's been really, really nice. In terms of freeing up teachers to do the 2020s, I've just seen that one from Claire. Thanks, Claire. So what we do is in normal times, when the 2020s are going to each other's classrooms, senior leadership covered it. So any senior leaders who weren't class-based, or I'm class-based, I teach 90% of the week. So for 5% of the week, I'm quite happy to go into other people's classes. So during my PPA, I'll happily release people to pop out of class for 20 minutes because it supports them with their development. So that's worked really nicely. But it has been quite useful if you do have someone who's non-class based or an HLTA or anyone like that who can sort of cover. That's been useful. With support staff, it's not been as difficult because they've been able to pop out for 20 minutes, particularly if they're in different phases, because we have staggered breaks and staggered lunches. That's been really nice to do in that regard. And in COVID times, freeing up people to do 2020s. So yeah, in COVID times, it's literally just an iris clip. So you just have the iris kit out for a normal session, record that, crop it wherever you want to. So that's no additional time. And then the 20-minute coaching conversations, staff arrange between themselves for when to do that. And they can be covered to be out of class if they want to, but mostly it's done during assemblies. We found is a really useful slot because we have a pre-recorded celebration assembly that support staff can hold the fort while people pop out, or teachers can hold the fort while support staff pop out. We found that's a really nice slot of time. But also because we've cropped our weekly CPD sessions, they're actually timetabled to go on quite late, but we've actually been able to crop them shorter. And we found that's brought quite a lot of goodwill where staff are quite happy to have those 2020s because it tends to only be one or two a term at most. There's not a lot of them. So it's balanced out quite nicely. I hope that clarifies our feelings and way of doing that.
Thanks, Claire and Helen, for the questions there, and thanks, Chris, for answering those. So looking then at some of the other topics that Chris talked about, quite specifically with groups and rooms. So groups is something that Chris and his colleagues have used really well at their school, and it's something that I think a lot of schools could make better use of, especially with us working with you to achieve that. So has anyone got any questions around the use of groups or indeed anything else relating to Chris's presentation? Thanks, Jenny. I can certainly feedback that back to the developers. Groups are something which we do want to look at as an organisation, so I will certainly feed that back as a good suggestion. It's not something that will be coming in the immediate future, but all suggestions are appreciated, so I'll certainly feed that back. Claire, can you add a clip to multiple groups? Absolutely, you can. You can do that by sharing it into as many groups as you like. One thing that I'll be doing soon is asking you to get in touch with us so that we can arrange a catch up between you and your designated Iris Connect consultant, and that's certainly something that they'll be happy to show you and show your colleagues as well. Has anyone got any final questions for Chris, perhaps relating to? Well? Oh, sorry, of course, yeah.
So just to add to Claire's question about adding to multiple groups, there's just a caveat with that. You can't share someone else's clip. So if someone's delivering a maths session and I'd love to share it to the maths group if I was the maths coordinator, I can't share their clip to it, they have to share it. So it depends what admin rights you've given people in the groups. So for example, for all of our groups, we've put subject leaders and senior leadership as admins for those groups. And then you can set other staff as being able to add content without being an admin for those groups. And we found that's been really useful. So you can share to as many groups as you want, provided that you're added to that group and that you've got access to be able to add clips to it. The only other way that people can add for you is you have to do a request to Iris in writing to be able to share any other clips across.
Yeah, something I should have probably cleared up, Chris. So yeah, thank you very much for mentioning that, because it is a really important caveat with the use of groups and sharing in general that you can only share your own videos. One thing Chris mentioned in his presentation was that he's been using comments really effectively so that people can give and receive qualitative written feedback to each other in a time-stamped way. Has anyone got any questions on comments, or perhaps questions relating specifically to the SERFs, the self-evaluation and reporting forms that Chris mentioned as well? Has anyone got any questions around comments or those forms?
I'll just say as well, if anyone is typing questions, that I'm more than happy to share examples of those forms if anyone would like to after this. If anyone wants to pop me a message on Twitter or via email, I'm more than happy to share any of our documentation that we use, so our curriculum model, any of our subject flowcharts, and any of the supporting documents like our 2020 questions or anything like that. I'm more than happy to share. Just give us a shout and a wave, and I can fire it your way.
That's great. Thanks, Chris. Well, if anyone does have any questions for Chris, please do either get in touch with him, as he said, or please do feel free to pop them in the chat as we go through the rest of today's session. So. The final thing that I would very much like to leave you all on really is the promise from us that we are here to support you achieve the same goals that Chris has achieved at his school. So no matter where you are in the country or how long you've got left of your Iris Connect subscription, we would really love for you to book a catch-up or a refresher training or an advanced refresher training using things like groups and the forms and the film club that Chris talked about, so that we can effectively support you in achieving your goals. So as it says on the screen there, please do email community@irisconnect.co.uk. What will then happen is that your designated Iris Connect consultant will get in touch with you. Chris, would you mind unmuting yourself just for a second so that your email address? Oh, you've beat me to it and put it in the chat. So just to amplify that, Chris's Twitter handle is @Mr. H the Teacher, and his email address is c.harrison@groveroads.n-yorks.sch.uk. So I think you'll all agree that Chris's presentation today was absolutely fantastic, really informative, and most importantly, really useful and actionable. To answer your question, Adrian, yes, this session is available as a recording. You will all be sent a copy and it will be available for your colleagues if you wish. And on a similar note, if any of you do have anything to share, it doesn't have to be in a webinar format like Chris just did, though of course that would be welcome. We would be happy to hear from you. So a lot of teachers have written blog posts about their CPD experiences relating to Iris Connect as part of our Teacher Tales series, which you can find on the Iris Connect website. But we really want to encourage sharing and collaboration, not just within your school, but across the entire Iris Connect community, like Chris has very generously done today. So again, please do email community@irisconnect.co.uk if you'd like to share your Iris Connect story. And just finally, the last thing I'd like to mention is that we do have a couple of spaces, and I really do mean a couple of spaces left at our pupil mental health and wellbeing webinar this coming Wednesday at 4 p.m. So please do let us know in the chat if you'd like to be sent information about that, though I really do have to stress there are only a couple of spaces left. But all that's left for me to say then is a final huge thanks to Chris Harrison. It's been fantastic, and we really appreciate your time and your you sharing your wisdom with us and sharing everything that you and your colleagues have managed to do with Iris Connect at Grove Road. So thanks everyone else for attending. I don't know if you've got any final words that you'd like to say, Chris.
Yeah, I just wanted to, my last part to say would be, every decision that we've made, we've put the children at the heart and we've put the staff at the heart, and we're looking at well-being in every different level and every different decision we've made. So if anything at any point was making more of a workload or more hassle, we weren't going to do it. So I've tried to share what we found to be a really realistic model that hasn't had any negative impact that we've seen so far. It's replaced a much more formal model that we used to have, and it's become much more user-friendly, and the staff have really taken ownership of it, which is a big part of Talk for Teaching. It's the idea that the staff take ownership and that senior leadership can step back and just have that sort of overarching view of where things are going. So I'm hoping that the ideas that I've shared with you, I'm hoping that you're feeling that they're doable and there's something you can have a bit of a play with. But like I've said before, my email address and my Twitter handle are there. So if you need any clarification, if you need any supporting documents to make your lives easier, if I can save you an hour of your time by popping you an email through, I'm more than happy to do that if it saves you some time. So yeah, just give us a shout. I'm more than happy to talk you through anything else. And yeah, thank you very much for coming. It's been lovely to have lots of people here. Thank you.
That's brilliant. Well, thanks again, Chris, and thank you all of you for taking the time to attend today. So all the best for the rest of term, and thanks again.